Welcome back to Fast Market on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White, joined by my co-host Kevin Hinks. But let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment. That's going to be Andy Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio. Thanks for joining us today, Andy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, so we're talking Etsy. The stock has been pummeled about 56% so far this year. It was hit an all-time high last November, above $300 a share. It's kind of reflective of what we've seen out of the consumer. They're changing their habits. A lot of companies that don't make money or growth names have been hit. But I was looking at some of the data, Andy. In Q1 of 2022, company had over 95 million active buyers, which jumped 5% from Q1 of 2021. And the downloads in May alone were over 2.2 million downloads. So they continue to grow their user base. Are people just not spending on Etsy at this point?
Yeah, I think that's really kind of what's going on. Kind of another one of those companies that got ahead of itself, or stocks, I guess, that got ahead of itself in late 2021. But the underlying company is a very good company. But we're going through another shift. And when we look at just overall e-commerce, mentions or demand, we've seen that really kind of flatten out. There's not a lot of growth there. What happened in 2020 was a huge spike that moved a lot of people onto e-commerce that weren't there before or made them more loyal to it. But, once things started to open back up, we kind of have hit a new normal in terms of e-commerce. And this is not lost really on Etsy. In fact, we kind of see Etsy's growth rate is a little bit troubling. Mentions of people talking about, shopping on Etsy or using Etsy's retail platform as a buyer or a seller have actually at this point dipped below 2019 levels, which, is definitely not something you want to see. It tells me that there was a massive kind of shiny new thing about Etsy during the pandemic that's, quite frankly, just not there anymore. We're seeing that weakness continue as we move into this quarter. The first month of this quarter looks pretty weak as well, a 9% decline versus where we were at in 2019's Q3. And so, overall, I think Etsy's down for very good reasons. The 54% drop year to date is really pretty well justified at this point. We don't see any reason to be bullish or necessarily even bearish on Etsy going into this earnings event. We kind of think the market's pretty much got it right, and it's going to come down to, can Etsy, turn things around or get some positive momentum with that growing user base as we head into that back-to-school season, and then ultimately, what matters most to them is the holiday shopping season. So I think this is kind of a throwaway quarter for Etsy. We don't see any reason to be, pounding the table on this name at this point. Just kind of grinding along, and we'll have to see if that's good enough for Wall Street.
Andy, we were just talking about Chipotle and how Brian Nickel broke down their earnings into lower income people getting hurt by inflation, middle to higher income people, which are Chipotle's customers, actually doing okay, and that's why their numbers were so good. Well, is the reverse of that story what's hurting Etsy? Is the lower income consumer that may be part of their customer base, is their spending power just getting hurt, and therefore that's connecting the dots to just lower numbers on Etsy? And if that's the case, do you just got to wait this out till that part of the economy gets better?
Yeah, I think that there's something to that. I think there's something to the idea of Etsy as kind of being a luxury option for people that normally don't have luxury budgets. This is a place you can go to get something really cool, handmade, unique that no one else has. A lot of times you're going to pay significantly more for it than you would for the same type of item at a Walmart or Target. And so as budgets start to get pinched, you do wonder if the consumer has, as much enthusiasm to find that unique and cool thing, or is it now back to being about utility and just making the trip to Target or Walmart and just get something that'll do? So I think that is a factor. Be very interesting to see what Etsy executives have to say on this call. because I think it will, be very important as we go into back to school and holiday shopping season. If they see their consumer base just having a little bit more anxiety about buying these unique, one-of-a-kind, a little bit more expensive items.
Yeah, and Andy, we've seen that shift over the last quarter or two where people are actually going out to stores at this point. And then you look at, Shopify's cutting 10% of their workforce at this point, basically in that same space where they're, using their platform for small businesses. And that's right up, the alley of Etsy at this point. But when you see the trends in consumer spending, and you guys cover all this stuff in a lot of the names that you cover, is that part of the drawdown too, where, hey, one, I don't have a lot of discretionary income anymore because inflation's so high. But two, if I'm getting something, I'm going out to the stores. And then you look at Walmart and Target coming out, lowering guidance moving forward, due to inventory issues, among other things, and inflationary pressures. Is that just spell the triple-headed doom for companies like this just at this point?
Yeah, I think in the near term, there's just so many headwinds for a company like Etsy. It's almost like everything that was a tailwind, 18 months ago is now turning into a headwind. That's tough sailing, to use a term. But I do think that Etsy is a great company, and long term, I think that they're doing incredible things. They're really well managed. This is just a very difficult environment. The stock got way ahead of itself. If you'd asked me a month ago how we were going to play this going into earnings, I would have leaned to the bullish side. But that earnings score has degraded, over the last month or so. As we've started to see this first quarter of Q3 come in, it tells me that there's not going to be a whole lot of reason for massive optimism from executives at the company. So we're pretty much going to stay on the sidelines here in terms of earnings, but keep our eye on Etsy for long-term opportunities.
Yeah, and I know they have a short interest built up in a lot of these shares. So degradation on the side as far as your earnings score goes going into here. I think it's just going to be a rough one for the retail space in general, especially if you're selling apparel and such. Yeah. All right. Great data as always, Andy. We'll take that into consideration when creating an example trade. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Thanks.
All right, that's Andy Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio, breaking down the data on Etsy.